Hello Internet, Rob from A Minor Error here with another plugin review. This is a new one that I've just been checking out called Soothe from Oeksound? I don't even know how to pronounce it. This is a pretty cool plugin. I really like the concept or the idea behind it. I'm still a little on the fence about how necessary it is, which we'll get into kind of later on. Basically, the idea behind Soothe is that it's basically like a dynamic EQ, except that it's designed to do those hard kind of notch filtering that you might do on like a guitar track. So a common problem with virtual guitar amps, also ones that have been mic'd up, but definitely ones with impulse responses like this, is that you get sort of resonant frequencies that need to be carved out or removed. Now, the thing with an EQ like this is that think of it as like a static thing that's just planted over top of the sound. It's going to always be making these cuts all the time. A dynamic EQ is one that will specifically target a band and then basically clamp down on that band only when that frequency builds up too much. So like right now, this is my rhythm guitar track, and I'm using this dynamic EQ to really clamp down on palm mutes and stop the palm mutes from basically building up and exploding, too loud. It really kind of clamps them down and controls them. So you can really see on that palm mute, it's really sitting hard down on it to help control those frequencies. That's basically the idea behind Soothe, is that it's a more complicated version of that. So the idea is that it will cut multiple bands on different frequencies that you've basically selected and told it that you want to have removed. So basically what Soothe is doing is it's detecting different frequencies, and then it's carving those out at specific times to help remove that harshness or soothe the sound. The basic controls, I've got the newest version of Soothe, so Soothe 2. It's got a soft and a hard setting. Basically the soft means that those cuts will be softer. There, as it says right there, it's more transparent, easier to adjust, yada yada. The hard mode is designed to do the opposite of that. It's to push harder and really get in there and carve it out more. Sharpness controls how deep it is. Selectivity controls the processing on more narrow peaks again. But one thing that I really like about it is it has the ability to turn off the stereo link. So basically, if that build-up frequency is just in a crash symbol on the left speaker, it'll only cut on the left side. It won't cut uniformly across both channels, which right now I am using this on my room to help kind of remove some of those frequencies. This is subtle, though. It doesn't really jump out to me as very obvious. So what I'll do right now, I'm on my room mic. I'm using GGD P4 kit for my drums, and Soothe is I'm using it on the guitars. I'm using it on a bunch of stuff, but we'll start with the most subtle, I think, which is the room mics. Now I'm going to crank up the depth control, basically just sweep it through to hear, just how much it can affect the sound. When you get to the higher settings, it obviously is totally trashing the sound, which is fine. But, that way you can hear kind of the broad ranges of what it's sort of doing. So we'll start it at 0, actually. So, obviously at the higher settings, it's ridiculous and it's trashing the sound. It is a very subtle effect. It's not one that jumps out enormously to me. I had it set pretty modestly as well. I actually had it set just at 0, I think, when we started. So, the depth is, the more you push it, the deeper those cuts are going to be. And I think if you're not listening on headphones or good reference speakers, you really probably aren't going to hear the difference unless I'm like really cranking it. It's very subtle. And that's sort of where I'm stuck with it, is that I'm not sure how necessary it really is. I know so I was watching a Nolly mixing masterclass about how to get the most out of the P4 kit specifically, and he was talking about how a lot of people have been using Soothe and how it really like revolutionized overheads or room mics. And I was kind of excited to check it out, and then I felt like it's very, very a subtle effect. Then I wound up using it on the guitars, which I think is where Soothe might be a bit better or might be more necessary in a way. So what I did was I pulled up the preset, just tame the cab. And for this one, I have the stereo link up to 100% because it's a guitar and I want it to cut on both channels. Right now it's specifically on, I didn't combine my two guitars. Normally I combine them to save CPU, but so I've got basically the same instance, just copied and pasted across, and here's what it's doing. And with it off. So again, I think it's just a very subtle effect. I do think it is improving the sound quite a lot, but it's not as much of sort of like a wow factor as I was kind of hoping it would be. Just for comparison's sake, I'm going to turn my EQs on and off so you can hear just how much these sort of resonant cuts make a big difference in controlling the guitar tone, really controlling those sort of whistles and things that would really be unmanageable in a mix. So I'm not going to turn off the high pass or low pass filters. I'm just going to turn off specifically those cuts. So obviously that's a massive difference. You're going to be able to hear that difference through an iPhone speaker. Soothe isn't having that much of an effect to my ears. It's far more subtle, even with it set on the hard setting. And on the guitars, I've got the depth set much deeper than I did like on that room mic. And I would have expected it to be more obvious than it really is. It's very subtle to me. And what I'll do now is I'll just kind of crank up that depth so you can really hear, how much you could push it and what that's kind of doing. I think it is helping focus the sound, and it is a really cool concept and a really cool idea, but it just doesn't jump out to me as just so vitally important as something like, those kind of cuts are on specifically this guitar tone. Unfortunately, the guitar that this is recorded on is on a Leggett or Ninja. It's not the greatest quality, so I feel like the tone of the guitar isn't the greatest there either. And then just kind of lastly, we'll take a look at the overhead mics. This is another spot that I'm using Soothe in, and to try to help smooth out those overheads. The GGD P4 kit in general, just GGD products in general, are really, really well done, and they already sound great. And this is almost kind of like a thing that you might do with a de-esser. That's how I've done this in the past on cymbals to help kind of tame the harshness. Would use a de-esser. This is just a bit more specific and a bit more. It's definitely more versatile. There's a lot of different things you could use this for vocals. It is a very versatile plugin. I think, it depends on what your productions are. For me right now, I'm just doing instrumental music, and I don't have vocals to worry about. So unfortunately, I can't pop that on some vocals just to kind of show it. But let's take a look at the overheads and hear what that's doing. Again, it's just very, very subtle. So yeah, I think that's a very subtle effect. It's not overly obvious, and that's kind of where I'm stuck with Soothe. It's kind of an expensive plugin, and for it to be so subtle, it's hard for me to say if it's really, vital. Especially the way it was sort of introduced. Nolly really introduced it as this, really revolutionary, kind of plugin, especially for dialing in, overhead mics. And who am I necessarily to disagree with him? But it does just feel very subtle. And, this is kind of more the thing that frustrates me sometimes when you're dealing with audio production stuff, and especially plugins. So it's very easy to go down that plugin rabbit hole where you just feel like, if I have that one, now I'll nail that sound. And unfortunately, I kind of feel like this one is in a little bit of that category. There's been a couple ones that I've picked up along the way. They're not necessary, and I don't use it very, very much at all. And some of them are very expensive. So my thoughts on Soothe is just that it's such a subtle effect for the most part that I almost feel like it does fall into that kind of category. It's easy to go down the rabbit hole and buy, this plugin is what I need to help nail that sound. Look at all the stupid plugins I have on my system, that I've picked up through the years. And at the end of the day, which ones do I even use that commonly? There are some that are huge and vitally important that I find for mixes. So it doesn't have to be the Slate tape machine, but the tape machine is enormously important in my opinion to really getting your in the box productions to pop and sound what we're used to hearing a record sound like. Soothe is just in that very subtle kind of category, and if you push it, it's bad. So it's just hard for me to say yes, this is a vital plugin that you definitely need for your productions. Honestly, realistically, if you're trying to control the harshness in the cymbals, something like a decent de-esser might accomplish it basically to the same degree, would be my sort of opinion on Soothe at this point.